So how do we segment and target markets? This is important to understand. So in an STP strategy, we have a series of steps that we would follow. First, we group potential buyers into segments. So our potential buyers are consumers in the marketplace. Then we group products to be sold into categories. Then we develop a product market grid and estimate the size of the market potential. We select our target markets, take marketing actions, and reach our target market. So those are the 5 steps of the STP strategy. So in this first lecture, I'm going to continue talking through the first 3 steps, which are the segmentation aspects of the STP strategy, and then we'll continue in later videos for the targeting and positioning aspects. So if we talk about market segmentation, the idea is we group consumers into segments, and when we're segmenting consumers, we must make sure that we're creating a segment that is actually worth it. So what are some of the criteria that we need to think about when we are looking to segment consumers? Well, so there are 5 key things to really consider when we are looking at a segmentation strategy and to determine if a group should really be segmented. So one thing we want to consider is the simplicity and the cost effectiveness of assigning consumers to that segment. So we must be able to actually identify consumers that belong in that segment and then cost effectively add them to that segment. So if we think about certain consumer characteristics, they can be really easy for us to identify. For instance, a consumer sex is really easy for us to identify. We can also gain a lot of information about geographical location, but there are other aspects of consumers that are much more difficult for us to gain information on. And we may have to do some form of research that could have a cost associated with it. So we want to make sure that we're actually able to identify whatever characteristic we're using fairly easily, and then there has to be a level of cost efficiency to it. We also want to consider the potential to increase profit. So if a segmenting strategy results in a segment that really is quite small and doesn't maximize the profit or return on investment, it's likely not a good segmenting strategy to be using. We want to look at the similarity of buyer needs within the segment itself. So within the segment, consumers should have obviously common needs that are going to lead to some form of similar marketing action in response to a promotional aspect. The difference of needs of buyers among the segments. So really, if we look at different segments, they should be different from each other, or else they should actually be combined together. So if I have 2 separate segments, but consumers can blend into both of them, meaning it's not distinct which one they should be in, we should probably combine both of those segments together and form one single segment. And then look at the potential of marketing action to reach the segment. So if you can't reach the segment through simple marketing actions, we likely don't want to segment that way because it's going to be difficult for us to reach those consumers, and then it's not really worth it. So let's look at some common market or consumer segmentation strategies. So 4 of the most common are geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral. So based on the criteria that we just saw in terms of segmentation, these are the most common strategies that fit for firms. So let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So I like to say geographic segmentation is pretty straightforward. It's segmenting via some specific and outlined region, and this could be at a city, a state, a provincial, a country level. There's all different ways, but it's based on a geographic segmentation or a location type of segmentation strategy. So if we look at something like McDonald's, we can see that they segment here. The red countries are segmenting together and the blue are segmenting together. But there's a ton of different ways that we can do this. So we also see, if we want to look at breakfast cereal consumption patterns, this example is using different regions where we look at the Americas, the Asian Pacific region. So you can see different regional groups can be formed, but all of them are still using a geographic segmentation. We can also use a demographic segmentation style, and this is really the most common. And the reason I would say that this is the most common strategy is because it's the most easily identifiable characteristics about consumers. We can gain information pretty quickly about consumers' age, their gender, their family size, occupation, etc., etc. So demographic segmentation is a little bit easier to get information on, which allows more and more firms to use this segmentation strategy. The next one is psychographic segmentation. So here we're segmenting consumers based on personality traits, on their common interests, their personal values in terms of moral values, or even personal attitudes that they have. So an example of a firm that uses a segmentation strategy that is psychographic would be Netflix. And here they can do it based on the interests that are being communicated by what you watch. So if you're using a streaming service that says these are suggested for you, they're segmenting consumers based on what they have previously consumed in terms of what they've been watching. So maybe you are part of the drama segmentation. Maybe you're part of the rom-com. And that just depends on what they have segmented you into based on your personal preferences of what you've been watching. The last one we'll discuss is the behavioral segmentation strategy. So this is based on some observable actions or attitudes by prospective customers. So we could look at where they buy, how frequently they buy something, what benefits they're seeking, or even why they buy. So this includes looking at their usage rate. So this creates loyal customers versus occasional customers. So the people who are always buying the product versus those who buy occasionally. And also considering the product features. So this is going to consist of the quality, the service, the warranty that they might be after, and understanding what benefits are most important to these consumers. So consumers may have preferences in terms of the size, the color, or the material of a product, and we can group consumers together based on what their product feature preferences are. So when we talk about behavioral segmentation, we're looking at two factors, potentially the usage rate, so how loyal a customer is, versus we can look at also the product features that are desired by a consumer group. So there's a great summary table in your textbook. I think this is a really great tool to use when you're trying to study or make sure you have an understanding of these 4 segmentation styles. So again, your geographic is looking at some form of location type of segmentation strategy, and you can see what standard breakdowns are there as well. Demographic, you're looking at, again, gender, age, race, life stage, household size, marital status. All of those would be included as demographic segmentation. Psychographic, we can look at personality or lifestyle factors, the needs of consumers here. And again, there's some good examples here about what typical breakdowns might be. And then lastly, looking at behavioral. So the retail store type that you purchase from, that's related to your consumption of the item. Direct marketing, your product features that you want, the usage rate that you're purchasing by. So those are our common consumer segmentation strategies, and we would use that in step 1 to segment consumers within the marketplace. Then in step 2,